Good morning, everyone. It is a beautiful day, and we only have 2 weeks left to talk about crucial conversations. Today, we are going to get through half of a chapter called Move to Action. Now, this is a little odd because we still have two full chapters left, and we're only getting through half of one this week. Well, we're going to skip the last true chapter. There's kind of a conclusion as well. But we're going to skip the last true chapter called Yeah, But. Yeah, But is a chapter all about very specific scenarios, and it's a great one to go and look at because it might have something that it talks about that you personally are dealing with. But they are not going to be things that every single one of us are working through, so we're just going to skip that one, and we're going to finish up with Move to Action, which is a big thing. So just a little bit of a brief. I'm going to go as quick as I can. A crucial conversation is one where your emotions are high, your opinions are different from the people you are with, but you still want to be able to work through something there. And it's important. The stuff that you're talking about isn't just fluff stuff. It is important. And with that, we've learned to understand how we go through a conversation, how we listen, how we walk through our story, how we control our emotions, how we listen to others and help them walk through their story to understand what's going on. And a lot of people make the mistake of one thing. They get through that conversation. They've listened. They've kept their emotions under control. They've listened to the other person. They've shared what's going on with them. They've figured out everything that's going on. And then they go, sweet, we figured everything out. Let's go. And they break and they go off on their own path and nothing changes. Why? Because they never moved their discussion, their dialogue, into action. They never actually did anything to change anything. You see, when we're having a crucial conversation, those other things are the building blocks of how we get to the point where we can make a decision that really helps both parties. But if we don't make that decision, that whole process of understanding, it really wasn't worth anything. So today we are talking about moving to action. We're going to talk about two different questions, one today and one next week. And the chapter starts out with this quote: "To do nothing is in every man's power. You have the power to do nothing, to change nothing. But you also have the power to change things, to make things different, to make things better." And we have to make that choice every single day with every conversation we listen to. And a lot of times, decisions don't work because we have unclear expectations of how we're going to decide. We never decide how we're going to decide, which is an interesting way of putting it. And it's also a little bit of a tongue twister. But when we decide, there's different ways we can decide things and move things to action. And when we don't understand how we're going to decide, we just skip the whole process itself. We just don't care enough to really work with it. And when the authority is clear, then the person that is in authority is usually the one deciding how the decisions are going to be made. They are the ones who sit there and go, I'm going to be the one, or I'm going to go talk to people and figure out what's best for the company, or I'm going to go take a vote, which are things that we'll talk about in just a second. But they're the ones deciding that. As opposed to, and that's a lot easier than when authority isn't clear. When there isn't a specific person that's up at the top, or if that specific person that does have authority is kind of taking what is being decided as either important enough or necessary enough that they kind of have to include everybody, whether that's full voting or otherwise. But they're sitting there going, I have authority, but in this instance, we need to work through this together. And that's also when it comes down to when you're talking with friends, when you're talking with people at church, when you're talking to family. There is a storyline kind of established, but it's not something that's set in stone. It's not like work. It's not like talking to your boss. It's not like a kid talking to a parent or a kid talking to a teacher. Those are different things. And a lot of our conversations come when authority isn't clear. Now, there's 4 ways that we can make decisions. 4 ways. And I'm guessing that you guys will know what some of these are, but it's a good thing to go over them and just to remind ourselves after we go through a conversation, how are we moving everything into action? How are we actually going to do something to help fix what we're going through? And sometimes you don't have to do anything. Sometimes just the conversation itself fixes everything. And sometimes the conversation itself is only really the starting ground for, okay, we've worked through what we're thinking. Now, how can we move forward? And number one, and this is the one that is most used when authority is clear, is command. And command is a lot of times like higher entities like government, whether that's state or like full country, whether it's work bylaws, things that are being passed on to you that can't change, and it's just like it's going to happen, and it's a command to you. You can't change it. It's demanded of you. I can't do anything about it. But otherwise, when we make our decisions by command, it's either because we trust the person in authority above us, or we look at the thing that is there and we're like, I don't really care how that gets decided. It's those kinds of things where I might trust Pastor Amos to make decisions based on the church, even when I'm not there. But also to the point where, like, maybe I don't necessarily trust Amos all the times, but when it comes to the color of the carpet in the sanctuary, I'm sitting there going, I don't care enough to really, like, sure, go ahead and just command what you're going to do there. Number two is to consult. Consult is a lot like commanding because it ends like commanding. So at the very end, the person of authority still says, hey, this is what we're doing. But before they go to the command, they go to people they trust. They go to people that are going to be affected by the decision that's going to be made. And they ask them and they seek to understand the best way that they can do what they're thinking about and the best way of action moving forward. But in the end, who still makes the decision? The person in authority, not the people underneath. And honestly, so when someone is in authority, when authority is clear, that is the best way to do things, is through consulting, where the person in authority consults with everybody else, but they still make the decision. But that doesn't always end the best, because that person's could still, the person in authority could still make a decision that other people do not like. The best for efficiency and also for making sure that everybody's heard, everybody works together, is number three, voting. And voting takes more time than commanding. That's the nice thing about when you have someone in charge that is making the decisions, is that the further we're getting down, the longer it's taking to do things. And sometimes you need things to be done faster. That's why a lot of times there is that person authority that does make the decisions. It's because they need to do it in a set amount of time. They need to do things quickly. They have a lot of decisions to make. But voting is best when one of two things really comes up, and that is either you need something to be efficient and fair, and people look at voting and they're like, yeah, that goes pretty quick. It's not the longest, it's not the shortest, but it goes pretty quick compared to what we're going to get to next. But it's efficient, and people look at it as fair because even if the voting doesn't go their way, they still feel like they're heard. I do something in kids' church every Sunday morning called a Think, Pair, Share question. I have too many kids to ask my cool questions in the morning, and so to make sure everybody is heard, I have them pair off, answer the question of the person next to them, and then come back to the group and I pick a couple of them out. Now, in the same way that the voting makes everyone feel like everything was fair, even though it not necessarily was, when I do this, everyone feels like they're heard, even though I only called a few people to actually share what they talked about with their partner to share it with the rest of the group. They still got to at least share it with one other person. They at least got to vote on what was going on. And finally, there is consensus. Consensus is the hardest one to get because in general, consensus technically means like everyone agrees. I mean, that's really hard to do. A lot of times this is something that does need to be done in smaller groups that multiple people together hold a position of authority, such as marriages, where you want the husband and wife on the same side. But the more people you get, the harder this is to do. Especially anything over like a household, anything over like 4 or 5 people. It's really, really hard to get consensus, especially all the time. But consensus is the most important when everybody needs to be behind what you're doing. Everybody, every single last person needs to be charging through, ready to knock down walls because they are in agreement with what's going on. And you know that if everybody's not in agreement, things are going to go bad. And those are the 4 ways that we can make decisions. Next week, we will talk about the rest of moving things into action. Hope to see you there. You guys are awesome.